Good morning. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our forum hour. So you'll notice that I am not Emily Zimberg Rogers. She is away this week, graduating down in Swanee. So all of our prayers and celebrations are with her. And I've got the honor to fill in and introduce our special guest for today, the Reverend David Anderson from Episcopal Community Services. And Reverend Anderson is the chaplain for Episcopal Community Service, as well as recently appointed, correct me if I'm wrong, the Chief Communication Officer, is that it? Yeah, we are so pleased and happy to have you with us. ECS, of course, has been a very long-standing partner with St. David's Church. And so we look forward to hearing. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Reverend David.
Thank you, Maurice, for your invitation, Emily's invitation to be here today. Maurice, as some of you may know, serves as a trustee on our board. So we're delighted to have Maurice on Team ECS. I've known your rector, Frank Allen, for many years, and I so admire his leadership, not only at St. David's, which is a remarkable church and a shining light in our diocese, but in his leadership in our diocese and in the wider church. And I want to thank you for what Maurice mentioned, for your unflagging support for Episcopal Community Services. Year after year, St. David's has given generously in so many ways to our work addressing intergenerational poverty. And you've been incredible partners, so thank you. I also just want to say that it's a privilege to serve in the Diocese of Pennsylvania with Bishop Gutierrez. 3 years ago, the diocese and ECS signed a covenant to more effectively dovetail our work in the city and the diocese work in the city. And it's great to have a bishop who has such a clear heart for the poor and for the vulnerable in our midst. Well, I thought we'd begin with a prayer. It's a prayer from the prayer book that I've come to love. So the Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Look with compassion, O God, upon the people in this land who live with injustice, terror, disease, and death as their constant companions. Have mercy upon us. Help us to eliminate our cruelty to these our neighbors. Strengthen those who spend their lives establishing equal protection of the law and equal opportunity for all. Grant that every one of us may enjoy a fair portion of the riches of this land through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Well, I've been asked today to tell you the ECS story, the story of today, the story of now. For 150 years, ECS has responded to human need in Philadelphia and the Diocese of Pennsylvania. And like those 9/11 first responders who ran to the fire when everyone else was fleeing for their lives, ECS has always run to the fire. In the early days, it was polio, tuberculosis. In the 80s, we were one of the very first in the city to confront the AIDS crisis and respond not with condemnation, but compassion. We have taken care of orphans with special medical needs, prison ministry, on and on over more than a century and a half. But today, the fire that we're running to, the fire is the intergenerational transfer of poverty and destitution. Some 26% of Philadelphians live below the poverty line. Does anybody know what the federal poverty line is?
It's about 21,000 for a family of four.
It's close. Yeah, it's $25,750 for a family of four. So I don't know how many people are in your family, but you think about four people living on $25,750. And even though 26% of people in Philadelphia live below that poverty line, we know that almost half of those people live at half of that level. And that's considered what we call deep poverty, if you live at half the federal poverty line. So now you have a family of four for about $12,000 or $13,000. So the question is, how do we run to this fire? About 4 years ago, ECS had a moment of reckoning. We knew that we had done great ministry for 150 years. We'd cared for thousands. We alleviated suffering. We bound up countless wounds. But if the goal was to move people out of poverty for good, we had to admit that we hadn't. We were good intentions, but we were maintaining people in poverty. So we decided to get out of the maintenance business and into the change business. And we began to look at new ways of serving people in poverty. And in doing that work, we relied on some cutting edge research and brain science to understand what it's really like to experience poverty, because of course there are so many myths and stereotypes. When what this research found was that people in poverty are in a constant state of crisis, that poverty is in fact a form of trauma, that when you're in trauma, in that fight or flight state, as we all know, your cortisol levels spike, which rips the brain out of the prefrontal cortex where you make good and wise and rational decisions, and everything just reverts down to your brainstem, the old reptilian brain where it's just live or die. We all know something of what that feels like, say you're running late for an important job interview, but first you have to drop the kids off at school. So you're running late, and then your car dies in the driveway. And you're just apoplectic. You're obviously not at your best. That's not a good time to make a life choice when you're in that moment. So imagine, if you will, living that scenario every day. It's like being in the ER trauma center every day. That's what people in poverty experience. All you can think about is how to survive today, how to keep the lights on, how to keep the car going, how to keep the kids fed. So we realized that if we were going to help people in poverty, we had to deal with the whole person. You know what this is like in trying to help anyone who is failing, that you can't just intervene and fix one little thing in their life, that you have to take the whole person holistically. So we change at ECS because we are a social service organization. We change from the old kind of case management. I don't know if there's any social workers in the crowd today, but the old case management process where you come to me and I tell you that you got to fill out a form and go to this office and get housing help, and then you got to fill out a form and go over here and get your SNAP benefits or your food stamps or whatever you need. We move from case management to coaching people. So instead of now telling people what to do, even compassionately, we sit people down and we ask them, where do you want to go with your life? Who do you want to be? I want to play you a brief video that highlights our mindset program that moves people from over a 3 to 5 year period out of poverty. The video is only about 4 minutes long, so it's brief, but I think you'll find it an engaging introduction to our work. So I will share my screen at this point, and you let me know if there's a problem. Otherwise, here we go.
Dreams of a bright future, but for people living in or near poverty, the odds are stacked against them. Change doesn't happen overnight. That's why Episcopal Community Services has built Mindset, a 3 to 5 year program that partners with people to help them achieve their goals and move out of poverty for good. Mindset is the first program in Philadelphia using an evidence-informed coaching methodology that empowers people to identify their strengths, define their vision of success, and achieve it with self-determination. Free for all accepted participants, Mindset provides a 2-to-1 savings match to help people build financial security. Mindset gives Sharon hope for a secure future. Sharon was living paycheck to paycheck, taking care of her young son, and paying down a loan from an unfinished degree. They are healthy and have a supportive network, but their comfort was fragile. In Mindset, Sharon was paired with her coach, James, who works with Sharon at a pace that fits her life. About 10 hours a month that includes coaching sessions, workshops, and consultations with a team of specialists that offer expert insight into things like career and finances. Mindset meets people where they are and helps them get to where they want to be. The program examines the whole person in 5 key areas of life: housing and family stability, health and well-being, financial security, education, and employment. Though separate, these pillars are interconnected. Change in one, up or down, can affect another. With James, Sharon identifies larger goals and breaks them down into smaller, more attainable ones that ladder up. Sharon knew she wanted a career that would be more lucrative and fulfilling, so she considered her strengths and researched the job market. She decided to pursue recording and audio engineering. Sharon needed a degree for that, so she researched class schedules and established a savings plan to purchase a new laptop. These gains helped Sharon re-enroll in LaSalle University's online learning, where she could finish her degree. For attending 95% of her classes each semester, Sharon receives a small monetary incentive. Her achievements are recognized, and her continued growth is rewarded. As goals get bigger, so do the rewards, and a larger one will be given upon graduation. As the coaching process is repeated, it becomes internalized, and Sharon builds the skills and confidence to tackle future goals independently. Moving from one distinct stage of your life to another takes time. Some life changes are planned for, like earning a college degree. Others are unexpected, like the setbacks everyone has experienced from the pandemic. Life's path is rarely a straight line. Mindset helps Sharon stay focused on her goals and tackle life's unexpected obstacles. She navigates her journey, and Mindset supports her along the way. Sharon has 3 more years left in Mindset. The more she levels up in life, the more she believes in herself and what she's capable of achieving. Sharon envisions her life 3 years from now. She has a job she loves, makes enough to keep savings, and can set a strong foundation for her son. He'll grow up knowing that he can achieve what he puts his mind to, just like his mom. Though the Mindset journey looks different from person to person, it has the same end result: financial security in a savings account, a fulfilling career with opportunities to advance, and self-determination in life. Imagine how much you can achieve in 5 years. To learn more about our work, visit ecsphilly.org/mindset. Everyone dreams.
So that's the key to ECS's coaching model for how to bring people out of poverty, not just temporarily, but for good. I wondered if anybody had any questions on that, on the program, on the video, or anything thus far.
Well, maybe not a question, but more of a comment. You know, I think you're talking about this intergenerational poverty. So in some ways, this is both trying to rectify past. Also, it almost feels like an intervention, like in the present, you know, in the hopes to building, you know, a future. But it's just amazing to see the connecting points between, you know, the learning, the teaching, and then the kind of empowerment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we really know from experience that the way to move people and our whole society into a more just future is through this kind of intervention, as you say. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah.
What sort of track record have you had so far with Mindset?
We've had we're about 2 years in, and so on a 3 to 5 year program, the early responses have been really good. We've had people who have been able to actually buy a home, people who've been able to start a small business. I was talking to a Mindset a man in our program who was just telling me that the way he described it was just, I felt like I was spinning my tires in quicksand, and as hard as I worked, I couldn't get anywhere until somebody, he was really just talking about that trauma, that brain trauma that we were talking about a minute ago. But with my coach's help, I could sort of like focus and do one thing, solve one of my problems today and another tomorrow. And so we're really seeing that curve that tells us this is where we're going the right direction. Jack?
Is there any graduates or people who have gone through this program successfully have volunteered to help you and speak to these people trying to get through, telling them how successful he or she has been?
Yeah. Well, as I said, yes, that's a great question, Jack. As I said to Craig, ECS has only been doing this for about 2 years. The program that we're doing is one that began with a group called Empath in Boston. Economic Mobility Pathways is what Empath is about. And it's now being used by hundreds of social service agencies around the world, and in the whole state of Washington, for instance. Some cities have taken on this model. They've ditched the case management model and looking for, so we do in fact have from other programs that are further ahead of us. Yes, we have those people. I was on a webinar just a couple days ago, seeing some incredible stories from people who've come through and are telling people that you can make it.
Thank you.
Yes, this is good. Any other questions? Everything's on the table. Questions, critiques, anything. All right. Well, I noticed on your website that that this series on your outreach partners, it's under discipleship. Maybe I read that wrong, but I think that's what I saw. At least I hope that's what I saw, because outreach and service should be engaged as a facet of Christian discipleship. As Christians, we seek to follow the example of Jesus, who didn't just make an occasional trip to visit some poor people in Palestine, showing up in his entourage of black SUVs, the way politicians and celebrities visit the poor or stop in to visit blighted neighborhoods. Jesus walked and lived among the poor, right? We know this. He gave them bread to eat. He touched and healed them individually, one by one by one. But he also addressed these systemic causes of poverty and injustice. like the prophets before him, Jesus called Israel to make good on God's commandment to care for the poor, for the widows, for the orphans. And, you know, in Israel's history, the care for the poor was not what we would call charity or something you could do if you felt kind of like so inclined. You know, if you were like a really super Christian or a super spiritual person, you might care about others enough to. No, it was the mitzvah, it was the law. Leviticus 23:22 says, and when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. So in Hebrew law, you didn't actually own your whole field, huh? Isn't that what we kind of tell people about Christian stewardship and tithing? That if you see your money as this is my money, then maybe you might give a few shekels here and there if you feel so led. But if you see all of this as God's gift to me, then it radically shifts, you know, who owns this and where this needs to be spent. So in a sense, you owned that property in Hebrew law, but you are also inextricably bound up in a community, and you have a holy obligation, the law says, to people that you don't even know. So it's not just charity, is it? It's a commandment. And this is what the beautiful commandments did. They weren't just thou shalt and thou shalt nots. The whole structure of the law was an outline of a new kind of personal identity held within a sacred community where I'm commanded not to be selfish. It's just not an option. I'm commanded to live in a mutual community. That's what Jesus knew as a Jew. It's the vision for humanity that he just inherited in the synagogue. That's why he told those head-spinning parables, powerful statements, you know, from the gospel on poverty, on debt, on economic justice. How many people remember the parable of the laborers in the vineyard? Anybody remember that parable? Can anybody tell me what happens in that parable? In the laborers of the vineyard? I see some people smiling. Maybe you remember. What happens? Jesus, or the landowner agrees to hire people to come and work in the fields for one day, remember? And then he says, what does he say? I'll pay you a day's wage, right? And then around 5 o'clock, what happens? Anybody remember?
More people are hired.
More people show up.
More people are hired, yes. Okay, we have some Bible readers here. And what do they get paid?
The same amount.
The same amount. And that's a classic Jesus parable of just dropping that in your lap and walking away and saying, you know, go meditate on these things, think on these things, huh? What Jesus, following the law and the prophets, what Jesus advocated for was not simply giving the poor bread, but giving them dignity, giving them a place in the community. You could even say a preferred place in the community, giving them work, giving them land, right? I mean, the whole land issue related to poverty in the Hebrew Bible is almost the whole of the Jubilee year in the Bible. You know, the Jubilee that the law outlined was that every 7 years debts were forgiven. There was 7 times 7, so every seventh year you had sort of little returns, little reprieves from debt. But then after the 49th year, the Jubilee, the 50th year, all the land reverted to its ancestral owners. Because that's what defined you as a clan, was this was your land. And of course, if you were impoverished, then you had to sell it. So you lost your land. And in an agrarian economy, if you don't have land, you have no capital. So the Jubilee sought to say, look, you can't amass all the capital forever in perpetuity. Not and have a just society. What Jesus understood was the systemic nature of inequity. Yes, you have to have emergency food, shelter for the poor and the destitute. I know St. David's and other communities support and fund that emergency service work. But we have to go beyond Band-Aids on cancer. We have to get to the root of the problem. And I think many of us are coming to realize that the playing field is not level, that there are systemic issues that favor some people and punish others, that some people are born into poverty, just like being born into bondage. Christians, I think, are coming to see that we have to look at the whole system that produces such an appalling divide between the rich and the poor. I mean, it's a remarkable time because even some staunch capitalists, hedge fund moguls that I've read are beginning to say publicly that the growth model that has wonderfully, amazingly benefited them, they acknowledge that, but they say, look, this growth model that we've been following doesn't work for billions of people on this planet. And that strictly from a security standpoint, even if you're not moved by the moral imperative of that divide, strictly from a security standpoint, we should be worried, because that will ultimately, that will destroy our society and lead to total unrest. So to understand poverty, we have to look at the whole system. I wonder if you've heard this parable of the drowning children. It's a parable that that speaks to me. You're walking along the banks of a river. Suddenly, from the river, you hear the cry of a child calling for help. And you dive into the raging waters to rescue the child, and you successfully bring this little one to the shore. But as soon as you reach the shore, you hear another cry for help, and another child is coming down the river and will drown. It happens again and again, and you keep going in. And eventually, there are so many to help that a rescue society is formed. And they build a building, and they have an endowment, and they have volunteers, and they have galas to raise more money to rescue more children from the river. But in time, the number of children crying for help is even more than the rescue society can handle. It's endless. And so one day you decide to leave your little village and to walk upstream, to walk up the river and find out why all these children are being swept into the river in the first place. What's wrong? Well, we could say people love it when you rescue children from the river, but they get a little upset when you go upstream to find out why. Huh? Well, at ECS, we have this dual commitment to work intensively, as you just saw in that mindset video, very intensively, one by one, with people for 3 to 5 years, and to do that individual work, and also to work at the systems level for structural change in the systems that adversely affect the people that we love and serve. And right now, just quickly, we're focused on 3 major issues that we're advocating on that present barriers to the people that we serve in poverty. And the first one is working for a raise in the minimum wage, or what we call living wage. The second is the so-called benefits cliff, where you lose all your public benefits if you make $1 more than a certain limit. And the third is confronting racial inequity. You may know a lot about the Fight for 15, a lot about concerns to raise the wage. We know that the minimum wage hasn't been raised in 14 years. It was $6.55 until in 2007, it was raised to $7.25, which is where it is now. It actually was phased in over 3 years. So 2009 is when we finally reached the $7.25. And before the 2007, the minimum wage had been stuck for 10 years at $5.15. So you think about almost a quarter of a century, 24 years of moving from $5.15 to $7.25 an hour. And that's where it's stuck. And you think how your pay, I'll just speak personally, how my pay has increased exponentially over those 24 years. So we believe it's not morally right to deprive low and mid-range workers of a raise. And in fact, that as many studies are now showing, that raising the minimum wage puts money in the pockets of people who will spend it locally, and it will actually be a benefit to local communities economically, and raise the level of taxes they pay. It's a win-win. The second issue that we're advocating on is I mentioned the benefits cliff. So if you're on public benefits in this country, and you're ambitious and you work hard and you get a promotion, say they give you $1,000 raise, but you're coming out of poverty, so you're on some public benefits. Then once that $1,000 puts you over the limit, and you lose all of your public benefits. So if you're a single mom, you lose your $3,400 childcare credit. So if you're that mom, you can't take the promotion, you can't take the raise, because you'll lose far more money. And so we think these are just common sense issues. Our executive director calls them SPPs, stupid public policies, that conservatives, liberals, even if, no matter where you are on the spectrum, we don't want people to stay on public benefits, do we? We want, so if we could stair step people down, so as you make more money, your benefits decrease. That way you're incentivized to say yes to take the raise, yes to take the promotion. That's what we want to see. So that's the second thing that we're working on, because so many of our people come to us and they're on public benefits, and we're showing them a way to get out. And yet at some point they're going to hit that cliff. And the third thing is simply racial equity. And the reality is that you can't look at poverty in Philadelphia without seeing race. You can, of course, some people don't want to see it. They're willfully blind. But we're committed, in the words of the baptismal covenant, to strive for justice and peace among all people, and to respect the dignity of every human being. And to that end, we have created the Advocacy Action Network, which is just going to be rolling out this summer and in this fall, where parishes and individuals can join us to be a part of this gospel work. And that Advocacy Action Network features 3 things: education, connection, and action. So the first thing, if you're a part of this network, is that you'll receive updates on legislation, updates on events and gatherings in the city and around the diocese. You'll hear about books we're reading. You'll see great white papers on crucial issues. We find that when people hear about the reality of poverty and they surrender some of their prejudices and some of the myths that they've been carrying, people want to do something. People want to act. But we also know they need connection, because when you do this kind of work, working for justice and peace and for human dignity, it can be a kind of a lonely job. And you need help, and you need support, and you need a community. You need like-minded people who will pray with you and support you and work with you. So if you're a part of the Advocacy Action Network, you'll be in touch with a like-minded group of people. You'll hear what others are doing on issues from anti-gun violence to raise the wage to food insecurity, whatever is important to your community or whatever's happening in your zip code, your neighborhood. And finally, action. People who are educated and in a supportive community are ready to take action. And if you're a part of the Advocacy Action Network, you'll receive calls to action, sending cards or emails to legislators, as well as participating in local and regional gatherings. You'll be connected and able to use your voice. God has given many of us a major voice because of the relationships we have, because of the connections we have, because of the network, business and civic that we have. We have a lot of power that we can leverage for God and the good. And this network gives us all a way to do that. So you'll hear more about that. And we hope that many will join. If you're interested in that, you can certainly let Maurice know and pass that along to me. I'm happy to send you information. But that really sums up what we're doing at ECS right now. And if we have a few minutes for questions or anything, I'm happy to do that as well.
Thanks very much. This has been wonderful. I've got two, we've only got a few more moments, but I've got two questions, thoughts. One is about the Advocacy Action Network. And the second, I wonder if you could just give us, we've been talking about it kind of internally, about a quick update about St. Barnabas. So
yeah. Thank you.
The Advocacy Network, folks could just reach out. They could reach out to me. I could plug them in with you. They could get information. I've got some folks that I think are going to be really excited about this. But one of the things that I heard you say is that we're both minded about what's happening in the city, but it's also local, based in your zip code. I thought that was a really important point.
Yes. And because this advocacy network will certainly advocate for the major issues that ECS is advocating for, the advocacy department that I just mentioned. But we're going to be a clearinghouse and a connector for, somebody called me this week and said, I really want to see the fair funding for education in Governor Wolf's budget supported. He's put it there. Now that's not one of our lead issues. That's not something, because not everybody can chase down every important thing. You got to limit yourself. So, but I'm able to kind of make connections to people over that issue. Obviously, as I mentioned, anti-gun violence is a huge factor, and that's another issue that's not in our top, but that we work with. We're working with Sarah Hedges and the Anti-Gun Violence Task Force that the bishop has so supported in our diocese. But that reminds me, Maurice, of the assessment we're doing at St. Barnabas. we've tried to get the word out that after 20 years of opening St. Barnabas Mission at 60th and Girard in West Philadelphia as a shelter for women and children, that we have closed the shelter because the city and other providers are moving away from what they call congregant shelter. You know, you're just in with a bunch of people. You don't have your own room. You don't have, and they're really moving to a model of what they call housing first. The first thing is just get you in your own home, which is far better than being in a shelter. I think we'd all agree to that. So we have moved from 20 to 40 to now 60 homes around St. Barnabas and in the city where we can house people, which we think is so exciting. And in terms of our coaching, because people, when you're in our housing, you receive our coaching. So what we are doing right now is that we've done a community survey of that neighborhood in West Philadelphia to see what the needs are. We've talked to all the stakeholders and neighborhood groups to find out what really needs to happen so that we can reopen St. Barnabas as a community center that can be a vital part of whatever's happening in West Philadelphia. So it's an exciting, we've already, quadrupled the food ministry that we're doing there. That's just, opening salvo, but we're looking to really transform that work. And in the end, we can see very quickly we'll be serving far more people as this community center than we ever could have as a shelter.
Thank you. Wow, that's awesome. I wonder if there, in the last moments that we have any other questions for Reverend Anderson.
Maurice, I don't have a question, but I just want to thank Reverend Anderson. We have something in common because St. David's has started up the Cuba ministry, and where you were the former parish, you went to Cuba and helped to found the Friends of the Episcopal Church of Cuba. So I just want to say thank you because St. David's has been able to partner with you and with Cuba through the work that you did there. So many thanks.
Thank you. My wife took the lead on that, my wife Pam, and she was one of the prime movers before the last General Convention that got the Church of Cuba brought back under the Episcopal Church where it began, before we just sort of, I hate to say it, kicked them to the curb in 1960. So that's beautiful. Thank you. I'm glad to know
and
that.
tell Pam I say hello. We've met, and she's helped St. David start off in our Cuba ministry. So we're thankful.
I will tell her, Lois. Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Small world, huh?
Yes.
Well, again, just many thanks. This was wonderful, very informative, very. I hear the call to action, and I hope others hear the call. And if you don't hear the call, I will be calling you to action. So again, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Grace. Thanks, Wall.
Thank you,
Blessings.
David.
Bye.
Take care.